All right. So, yeah, I don't want to take, waste too much time talk about, whatever. But thank you for joining me. I appreciate you coming on board
Sure.
to our New Zealand-based podcast here, in Whangarei. Quite excited, and you might have noticed that by my email. So, you know,
Uh-huh.
um, I have some questions for you um, regarding something you said yesterday on your podcast. Or was it the day before? Yeah, it was yesterday morning with Alan, and it had to do with nihilism. And do you want to
Yes.
like talk about that a bit more?
Well, what's specifically?
Well, when I'm watching this, the last 2 years has really shown us what, for us down here in New Zealand, right? We're so removed from Hollywood, yet we have so many major directors who are, some of, a handful of major directors who are part of Hollywood and who've moved on to Hollywood, like Taika Waititi and Peter Jackson, Andrew Nichol, one of the earlier '90s um, writer directors, and so we kind of have a have an interest in Hollywood, but the last 2 years have shown us, especially with lockdowns and stuff like that, that how they seem to be removed from the normal people, like everyday people. And so now they expect us, and we kind of looked at them and said, "Hey, look, you guys are you looking down on us." And now they're doing this whole strike thing, and then they expect us to feel sorry for them when they're, top tier is basically making millions of dollars, tens of millions of dollars, and yet they're out there saying that we should feel sorry for them when they don't even feel like they don't even care about their workers. And and I feel like we're being taken for a ride with this situation with Hollywood, on the one hand wanting us to feel sorry for them, on the other hand when they look down on us. So I was wondering if you could talk about that, and then we'll get into like indie comics, into promotion of I'm not indie comics, but promotion of indie media, and also your work with indie films and film threat.
Uh-huh. That's a really long question. What specifically, are, do you have a question?
What do you think about how we should feel about the strikes?
Well, I am always concerned when workers are taken advantage of. I think that's
Yeah.
that's to be, that's a cause for concern for everybody.
Mm.
I think the problem with SAG is they're too big. You know, you've got so many people that are in the organization, and only what 1% of the people are actually working, or it's a small figure.
Mm.
Um, so, I mean, the reason you don't have much of a problem with the DGA is there aren't that many members of the DGA. Most of the members of
Right.
the DGA are working, so they all work.
Right.
But a lot of the people that are in the SAG in particular are non-working, or not
Mm.
working enough to make a living, only working jobs here and there. So I am concerned that corporations are taking advantage of people who work in the entertainment industry. Absolutely. But I don't think that the industry is large enough to support the number of people who want to do those jobs. That's why I even have successful friends of mine who are successful actors who still bartend, because they don't
Right.
know. They might work, you know, they might work 1 month of the year, they might work 6 months of the year, but
Mm.
they never know. So a lot of my friends who make decent money, we're talking about substantial sums of money for a week's work, um,
Yeah.
don't know if they'll have, work going forward. So it is cause for concern. So I am concerned, but I
Yeah.
think the industry grew beyond its ability to support the number of people who want to be in the industry. And
Mm.
that's sort of a reality of entertainment. But the DGA doesn't have these problems because they don't have that many members, and most of the members
Mm.
work. So they don't have a lot of these issues.
Do you think it's the draw of the limelight that's caused this whole explosion of work, people seeking work in Hollywood? And even yesterday, the movie you talked about, where these young gentlemen, who made a album, and one went off to Hollywood and didn't succeed. And
So you're
so it
talking
kind
about
of,
my
the
story
reality of
yesterday.
it.
You're talking about the show I did yesterday.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So, like we see so many like biographies of people, like, I mean, even like, Marilyn Monroe changed her way back when, but for us it's fresh, right? Because we've been watching movies of her in it for ages, but of her just, seeking the limelight and seeking that, and then you out of that one success, you've got so many failures and stuff. Do you think we can, this strike will maybe cause people to say, hey, have a look at their situation and say, maybe this isn't working out and maybe we should go and do something else? Or do you think they'll still keep fighting to stay there because of the
I can't
glamour
I
of it
can't
all?
I can't speculate on that because I don't know
Mm,
what's in the heads of people, and people bump
yeah,
their heads in this industry for decades with no success and still try. There was a very
yeah,
famous actor named Dennis Woodruff. Woodruff was a failed actor. He had some bit parts when he was younger, but
yeah,
he never had any kind of career. He built a van that said, "Hire me, I'm an actor," and drove around
mm,
Hollywood effectively homeless. He never gave up on his dream. So I don't know how you tell people like go to culinary school and quit, but uh,
yeah,
I don't know. Like I can't get in the heads of those people. I mean,
mm,
I've for myself, I've dabbled. I've done television shows and
yeah,
whatnot back in. I did TV for about 15, 20 years, and
mm,
but I always actually did other work. I was doing film threat, so TV was a
mm,
side gig for me. It wasn't my primary career work. So
mm,
I don't know that the minds of people who want to pursue entertainment, they're not doing it necessarily for money, but they're doing it for the something burning inside them, a hole that
yeah,
cannot be filled. So you can't really tell a person like that to be practical and work a job
mm,
so they can, have a, a decent life going forward rather than, I don't know, living in an apartment with two or three other people,
yeah,
struggling with all your possessions in a milk crate. Like I've seen that. I've seen people just, how are you doing this? This is your life for decades. This is sad.
mm,
So I don't know I don't know what to say on that. I think the industry will after this shrink because
mm,
streaming is not what people thought it was. So it's going to shrink, meaning they're just going to make fewer TV shows and they're going to make probably not fewer movies, probably about the same number of movies. Actually, there's a shortage of films, but
mm,
they will be making fewer blockbuster tentpole movies. So you're going to see fewer movies made that are in the $200 or $300 million range because too many this year have tanked. Most
mm,
notably, The Flash and Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny, huge flops. Those were north of $200 million budget films. And I think you're going to see fewer of those films. I think you're going to
yeah,
see, you know, smaller movies. And by smaller, by Hollywood standards, is like 50 million. So
right,
I think that's what's going to happen. Fewer tentpole. I think the superhero film, I think you might get this James Gunn Superman movie, but I don't know if we're going to get this sprawling universe that he's planned out. I
mm,
just don't think that's I don't a lot of ambitious plans get announced in Hollywood. That's what the trades are. And
mm.
it doesn't mean they happen.
Talking about movies and production, like, I went to digital filmmaking school, right? So we were told to work within your means, to work with the least budget you can work with and stick with that and try to, try to make it as much as you can on the cheap, on the fly, and with as less budget as possible, and try to really think about how to, use as less money as possible. Why do you think, now it's like you have to make a $200 million movie to actually get in the theater and create that such a huge, a huge budget and costly product where you can't even meet, like you mentioned the blockbusters that failed, and then try to recuperate. You know, why do you think they went that way with the hundreds of millions?
I have no idea. I mean, I really don't. Look, I've only worked a little in Hollywood. I've worked. I do
Mm,
television. I've done television. I've made some independent films. I know the independent film world much better because I've made and sold movies.
Right.
When it comes to these big budget movies, I've had friends who worked on these movies, but I have no insight into the behind the scenes of any of that, other than
Mm.
what I can see is reported in the trades, which is the industry's in trouble, which
Yeah.
makes the idea of doing a strike pretty stupid, in my opinion.
Yeah. That's what really made me think, well, why are they doing it, especially coming out of all these lockdowns and stuff in the theaters? Like, because I'm quite close with the theater here, event cinemas here, and like I kind of look at them, they were being empty almost for 2 years, and now the movies come out and there's nobody promoting those movies, and it's like, but there's workers there, there's guys who are selling popcorn, the ushers and so on, and like people sweeping the floors or vacuuming the floors. How are they going to pay if we go back into shutting down and the money isn't being made at the door? So that's sort of like,
Well, I
maybe
mean, I don't know what to say. You're asking me a lot of questions about things I really don't know anything about.
okay.
Like, I know I have my opinion about movies I've seen. I have my opinion
Yeah,
about movies that I've made and produced, and I've been in the independent film world. But this is that, like, I see a lot of podcasts that they sit there and they want to speculate about this stuff. Look, I have to
sure.
read articles myself. I don't know
Right.
what's going on, or I have friends of mine that are in the industry. Next week I have a buddy of mine who's a WGA writer who's going to come on and just like he's going to lay it all out. He said he's tired of watching stupid people talk about this stuff.
Yeah,
And I hate to say this, you and I are stupid. We don't know anything. So I see a
exactly.
lot of podcasts that sit here and they're like,
Yeah,
well, Disney, blah, blah. You have no freaking experience with Disney. Okay. You have no insight. You've never worked
yeah,
there. My ex-wife worked at
yeah,
Disney. I have a little bit of insight about how corporate that organization is and whatnot.
yeah,
But a lot of it is these podcasts where people talk out their ass. I don't do that. I tend to
yeah,
I need to educate myself. So I
yeah.
don't really want to speculate about a bunch of things I don't know anything about.
Cool.
But I'm happy to talk to you about things I know a lot about,
Right.
which is
Which is what I
movie.
was going to head into next, which is indie filmmaking. So New Zealand has a really rich indie horror film industry, which gets promoted all over the world, and like especially with I think it's Jason, I always get his name wrong, Howland, who did Guns Akimbo, as well as Deathgasm, and
Yes.
so we have a real love for our horror scene, especially with indie. So do you want to talk about your involvement with indie films and the work
That's a
with the film
huge
fred?
Can you be more specific? My involvement with indie film, I mean, I could,
Yeah,
that's
it
been
is
38 years
with
of my life.
sure. What's your recent work with this with indie filmmaking?
Well, I made a documentary called Attack of the Doc. It's a
Cool.
documentary about G4 TV and Attack of the Show. I was a part of that show. I was on that show for uh, God, almost 8 years, and I thought it was very culturally significant. It was the
Mm,
least money I made in television, but it was the most fun I ever had. It was the only time I was allowed to really be myself on camera. To me,
mm,
I believe that G4 TV launched before nerd culture was mainstream,
mm,
and Attack of the Show and G4 TV was pioneering and ahead of its time. It launched on April 24th, 2002, and you know, Attack of the Show was launched in March of 2005,
mm,
and it grew a following. And you know, uh, I think it was very important because at the time this wasn't something that people. It wasn't mainstream culture. Well, and
mm,
after Attack of the Show launched in 2005, Iron Man came out, Marvel movies became big, the iPhone
mm,
existed, Twitter was created in 2007. So Attack of the Show was around for all of those significant events.
yeah,
Big tech boomed, Marvel and Star Wars became big, and you could go to a Target or a Walmart and just see, you know, Marvel t-shirts woven into just regular kinds of sports shirts for people to wear. Normally
yeah,
like, the local sports team is really you know, uh it is a big thing. You can find like t-shirts for whatever, Los
yeah,
Angeles Chargers. Okay, it's fine. But like the fact that like Iron Man t-shirts were a big thing was a big deal. So this show kind of in parallel grew in the face of nerd culture becoming mainstream. So I wanted to make a documentary about that period. I wanted to remind people of, the era before nerd culture was mainstream, before people, it was when people would respectfully disagree about a lot of things.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so
What, one thing,
it was
so,
important for me to document this in a way to kind of remind people and capture that era. And I like to think I did a decent job at it. It got a 99% audience score. It's fresh on Rotten Tomatoes. Critic score was 100% for a little bit. I think we had one sort of mixed review, but so it's an archival documentary, which is a different type of documentary to make.
right.
So
With G4, we never actually got it here in New Zealand. So
right.
my introduction was when you guys started talking about it, and with G4, the revamped G4 came on, and it became, this suddenly it was like, oh, there's all this stuff that's been before, and this is why the show is together, and that's the only reason that we knew about what was G4 was all about, all the tech of the show, and now we're watching the past, and then just seeing you do this documentary is like I'm keen to watch it and say, see what it was like, and you know people I've talked to from America, they know the show, but we never experienced that. I think we watch a lot of American TV here, and so we know a lot of the shows, but we never got that show, and I'm not sure why, or if it was at a later time or not. But it's great to be able to have something documented like that. What was it like putting that all together?
Wait, can you? That was very long.
Oh,
What is the
sorry.
question?
What was it? Yeah, what was because we never got to see G4. Our experiences will be through your documentary. So what was it like bringing this documentary together? Um, and did you put new stuff in it? Did you do interviews? What are the things that you put together that was different? Going into it the second time, looking at the past, I guess, in a sense.
Uh, well, you haven't seen the movie. If you saw the movie, you'd know the answer. But yes, there
Yeah,
are new things in the doc, and then there are.
excellent.
It's mostly archival footage with interviews with people. That an archival documentary is a style of documentary where you take
Yeah,
footage from the past and kind of reframe it and recontextualize it,
right.
and that's what I did with this documentary.
Is this your first one that you've done it this way, or have you done
Yes,
other work as well?
yes, it's the first I've done.
Are you looking at planning to do more?
Yes, yeah, I've been working on another one for about 10 years.
Oh wow. What's like? I was watching parts of the Star Wars court cases that you have been doing,
Uh,
and I'm looking forward to the Star Trek ones. What was it like putting together the court cases for the Star Wars?
uh, what was it like? I mean, it was
Yeah,
fun.
bringing all the people together. Like having
I mean,
the against and for.
it was fun. I just wanted to see people debate. I just wanted
Yeah.
an opportunity for people to debate each other respectfully who disagreed. Unfortunately, if I could say there was any failure in the case in that show, it was a show. It was a fake court case, and it was meant to
Yeah.
be fun. It was meant to be. A lot of people said that they felt that watching the trial was very cathartic because a lot of people are very
Yeah.
angry that we didn't get the Star Wars we wanted, and
Mm,
the Star Wars we got was pretty awful, if you ask me. The Star
mm,
Wars we're currently getting is pretty awful. So uh, I think it was cathartic for people, and really, all I wanted to do was see. There's a lot of people who claim that they love the Disney Star Wars. I've never met someone like that. They
yeah.
claim to, and then once you get them talking, they admit, yeah, it's not very good.
Yeah.
So there you are. But it was a lot of fun to do. I really just wanted to get people who disagree to talk to each other. But it was really hard to get people to defend Disney, because I think that once you drill in, the Star Wars they created, it's kind of indefensible, and it's also kind of embarrassing. Sure, there were highlights. I mean, the first
Mhm.
season of The Mandalorian I thought was very enjoyable, and the last episode of season 2, and just everything's just gone off the rails.
Mhm.
It's I mean, even the faithful, so to speak, have to admit that it's not very good.
Yeah.
So I really wanted to do it for fun. It was fun to do.
I remember when The Force Awakens came out, I went to the movies and watched it, and I had my beard, right, dyed in the colors of the poster. You remember the red sand? Um,
Yeah,
and it was I that's how much I was looking forward to it. I had it dyed. Cost me about $60 New Zealand, which is around about 40 US, I think. And then at the end of having seen the last movie, because I went with my sister's family and the kids and stuff, and we sat, at a Israeli, cafe and dinner after the movie, and I was like, "What just happened? What did I
right.
do to Luke?" Seriously, like my little nephew, who I had, lying on my chest at 3.5 years old, he is now about 8, or I think it was about, yeah, about 8, and he, grew up watching Star Wars with me as I babysit him. And, well, I'm just looking at him going, "What just happened?" And my sister's like, "Oh, yeah, this," and I'm like, "This is not it. This is not what I expected." And
Right.
it just and the other thing was I felt like I was the only one, because they were saying, and I thought I was in the wrong, because they were saying like, "Oh, we loved it. We loved it." I'm like, "I just didn't." And then, I'll get online, it's like, "Yeah, you hate Star Wars." It's like, "Yeah, but I love Star Wars, I've loved it since I watched it as a kid, and now you're telling me this is what I have to put up with and have to watch Luke get destroyed this way." And I was like, that was my thing. It was like, what? With Luke? And it just felt gutting. And that's why I kind of like kept started watching a lot more YouTube. And it just, it just felt like you'd been kicked in the, in the knee in the stomach would be the better way of putting it. And you're
Sounds
right,
fair.
it felt cathartic watching the case, even though it was, kind of like a mockumentary type thing, fakeness to it. But it just felt really, watching the passion of people, contest their case. It felt really good. And as a long-time Star Trek fan, like OG, original series,
Yeah.
which of I'm just, it's hard walking away from what you love, right?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
it's it's to be honest, man, it's really tough, because I've loved it for so long. I mean, I remember watching Saturday afternoons, and because we had reruns here, right? I moved over to New Zealand when I was like about 8, which was about 81. So never saw the original series as it aired, because I was too young, of course.
Same. Same.
But
Same.
but watching it on Saturday, next to when Fantasy Island's on and so on, and you're just watching it and you're just getting to know these characters, they become part of your life.
Yeah.
And you learn so much about it. Like, I didn't know black people existed, to be honest, right? When in Fiji, we knew we didn't know Africans existed as a kid in Fiji. We didn't know these, Asians existed, because we had in Fiji most. I think that we did have Asians, because my mom used to work at a Chinese restaurant in Fiji as a cook. But we had Fijian, native indigenous Fijians, you had the Indians, and so on. But we didn't actually know black people, and there was, Uhura up there, just being normal person, you know, as well as, the actor who played Zulu, and Irish. We didn't have any Irish people, and we got to, I got to
You mean
experience all
Scottish?
this.
You mean
And
Scottish?
Scottish, it's
Yeah.
beam me up, Scotty, all this stuff, and it just became like my. It was my. I think it was my first love was Star Trek, and watching
Right.
it get destroyed. It's like, what? It's really
Yeah.
hard, man, trying to deal with that. And it's like, and then when this third season came out, it felt like I was, it was back, and it felt real again. And then, Brave New World comes out. I'm going, okay, let's watch an episode, and then just couldn't do it. And I don't know how I'm gonna have to watch every single court case with the Star Trek when you put it on, because you know I guess I get to view it through everybody else's eyes as well, and you know it's just how, I mean, like, I've turned away from mainstream comics, you know, because of that, and I've just turned into collecting toys now, because like my toys don't tell me off, you know. That's the way I see it. That they don't abuse, yell, abuse words, abusive words at me. They don't tell me to, that I'm a bad person. I get to play with them, and it just feels, it feels okay to just play with the toys, or have them sitting there, whatever, collect them, and not have to worry about that. And I just think somehow, I don't know how we got here with pop culture being this way.
Well, you've got people
Um,
who don't understand the properties that are shepherding the properties. So you have Alex Kurtzman shepherding Star Trek. He doesn't understand it. You have Kathleen Kennedy shepherding Star Wars. She doesn't understand it. Once you get further removed from the original creator of a thing, the more the thing dies. I would say
yeah,
that when it comes to Gene Roddenberry, he was very involved in Star Trek Phase 2, which was a television series that never came out.
mm,
It was supposed to be a sequel series. It was the sort of second 5-year mission of the Starship Enterprise.
mm,
That ended up turning into Star Trek: The Motion Picture. You
right,
then had, um, you then had him involved in the movies, and then they brought in a guy named Harv Bennett, who was a TV producer, to do
mm,
Star Trek 2, 3, and 4. Then you had Gene Roddenberry was very involved in the
yeah,
development of Star Trek: The Next Generation. But the less Gene Roddenberry was involved, I think the more Star Trek drifted away from its
mm,
original, what it was originally intended to be. And then we've seen what's happened with Star Wars and George Lucas's lack of involvement.
yeah,
Now I think we all look back fondly on the prequels and say to
mm,
ourselves, they're not as bad as we originally thought. I think we
yeah,
were kind of shocked at how different they were, but that's also part of their charm. I
yeah,
mean, he did a lot of things that were unexpected in it, but I will go back and watch the prequel Star Wars
mm,
movies. There are great lightsaber duels, there are dramatic moments, there are quotable lines, and I cannot say that about any of the Star Wars sequels
no,
or almost any Star Wars that's come out since Disney acquired the property. I hated The Force Awakens when it came out. I remember my friends being super pumped and excited, and
mm,
I didn't care. I thought it was awful.
mm,
And I thought it was awful that Luke wasn't even in the movie, that Han,
yeah,
Luke, and Leia didn't get reunited, and that Han
yeah,
Solo died in a terrible way. And I don't think that the people who were in charge, I think J.J. Abrams effectively, to me, a fraud.
mm.
Um, that's my opinion. But yeah, there we are. I don't know what to say about that, except that I do believe that the further away you get from the original creator of a property, and someone new comes in and they start making up new rules like
Mm,
force healing powers. If that was a real thing that existed,
yeah.
why wasn't it used before? I think when you start throwing in new rules for things, it's stupid. So there you
I,
go.
I I feel it like, because these franchises have been such a huge part of our life, that we instinctively know something is wrong, but we can't articulate what it is that about it that we know it's wrong until we start talking about it with others. And did, did you feel that way when you were watching it?
What's that? Can you repeat
Did you feel
the
like it was something was instinctively wrong when you're seeing the first
100%,
movie?
100%.
Yeah.
It didn't feel organic. It didn't feel, there were no star wipes.
Mm,
I think they got rid of that by the third Star Wars sequel.
yeah.
They didn't even promote it as episode 9. And they didn't
Right.
even use Star Wars. They just said Rise of Skywalker. I mean, it was just
Yeah.
It was poor marketing. It's like they were trying to supplant the things that George Lucas had created. You know, I know. I just at this point, I don't know that the franchise is salvageable. I think that the only way to save it would be to end it, meaning have it go away for a decade and then come back. And by then, I think people will not care. You know, you need to create new fans as well as satisfy the old fans. And I think they did neither. They weren't creating new fans, and they certainly didn't satisfy the older fans. And I think that was a mistake to dishonor the legacy of these characters.
Yeah. One thing I've been thinking about, like with Kathleen Kennedy, right? And with the latest movie going the way it is with Indiana Jones, I kind of feel like she basically wants to destroy the legacies of, you know, of these characters, of these directors that we've come to love, and you know, that have become huge part of our life. You know, I'm 50. I just turned 50 this year, you know. So, you know, that's 40 years of my life. That's been just over 40 years that I've spent with these characters, these franchises. And yet then to see somebody just have such a disdain for these gentlemen, you know, and these films, these characters are so huge part of our life. I mean, like I remember Kalima, you know, Indiana Jones, and watching that with mum and dad, and you know, and just seeing an Indian on a big screen like that who had been in Bollywood, you know, suddenly show up and as a bad guy, and it was like it didn't matter, you know, and then suddenly to turn around and go, I don't really care about this anymore. You know, do you think it is because maybe there's some thing unworked out thing that she's got, or maybe we're speculating, of course, but I mean, I feel that way that
Yeah,
she
I really don't like to speculate on things.
right,
I like to speak from my area of expertise. I know
yeah,
there's a lot of YouTube channels that like to speculate on,
yeah,
well, what is Bob Iger thinking? Well, you know, I just think that, you know, my general impression of most executives is they're very out of touch.
yeah,
They aren't fans of the things that they're selling. They're
mm,
effectively glorified accountants,
yeah,
and they know how capital works. They know how banking works. They
mm,
know how the business works, but they don't know how to harness creativity and make money with that. And so that's why you see so many of these big companies just acquiring
mm,
IP, because someone like a George Lucas and Steven Spielberg, just two I will mention, are probably two of the most successful
yeah,
people in the entertainment industry. And
mm,
those people, those two in particular, are very good at the one thing that a filmmaker or a creative person needs to master to be successful. What is
mm,
that one thing? You need to be wildly creative and imaginative
yeah,
while also
artistic,
having
yeah,
a business sense. And
mm,
those are two completely different, left brain, right brain, right? They say, you
yeah,
know, scientifically speaking, one side of your brain is creative, the other side is logic and business and, you
mm,
know, uh, you know, more practical thinking, more
mm,
practical, but you need to balance both
yeah,
to be successful. And George Lucas was able to do
mm,
that. I mean, if you see the early interviews with him, he says, well, I'm effectively a toy maker. You know what I mean? Like
yeah,
he was he knew what his strengths were, and he somehow was able to trick movie
mm,
studios into allowing him to pursue his creative
mm.
passions, and he was good at making money with it. So, yeah.
Well, in closing, I know I've only got you for a short time. So one thing I've noticed recent years, that producers are the thing that everybody, like movies suddenly started saying, but producers of such and so, executive producers of this thing, not directors, not writer of, and not acting. I feel that maybe that's when it started. This whole this disconnect with like not actually being about story, not being about actual the auteur, right? The director bringing his vision of the story to life, but the executives. and I can't remember exactly what was the first film that did that, but I think that might be the start of this whole the money being the what pushes the artwork rather than the artist pushing the art forward. Have you noticed that?
Well, generally speaking, I would just say that in order to be a successful artist, you have to be good at business. There are
Yeah.
some very good artists who are terrible at business,
Mm.
and so they struggle.
Yeah.
And I think, to me, if you're a successful artist, then art is what you do for a living, meaning when you look at your paycheck or you look at money, the money that you have brought in has come from your art, be that, a film you made, something you wrote, or even a YouTube channel, right? Like, I
Yeah.
think people appreciate what you do
Yeah.
enough that they will give you money to do that thing.
Yeah.
That's very hard to do.
Mm.
That's very hard to do. And people struggle at that for long periods of time. So that is really the challenge of an artist, is to become a business person where
Mm.
what you do, the thing that you do, the art that you do, and maybe the better term than artist is creator. You're a creator.
Yeah.
You create music, film, words, videos on YouTube, whatever it is. You're a creator. That's an all-encompassing term for that work. But if you can do that and that's your job, you're making money, I think that's the ultimate. Now, can you make a lot of money?
Yeah.
Even better. You scale that,
Mm.
if 1,000 people like what you do, maybe 10,000 people will like what you do, or 100,000 or 1,000,000.
Mm.
So, John Waters had a really interesting quote once. He said that, you should try to do something for 10 years in terms of
Mm.
like pursuing your artistic, passions. Do something for
Mm.
10 years. 10 years, just 10 years. If you don't really see any success in 10 years, you actually might want to think about doing something else or
Yeah.
dramatically changing the way you're going about it.
Mm.
But you can't just work on something for a couple years and expect success, but you
Right.
can't be doing something for more than 10 years and think, well, I'm finally going to make it. But Jim Carrey famously was homeless.
Mm.
Canadian actor, comedian Jim Carrey was homeless. He was in Los Angeles. He wrote him as a joke. He wrote himself a check for $1 million.
Right.
Like, it was a fake check, but he did this as a way to go, I know my value. I have value as an
Yeah.
artist, and I'm going to make something of it. I do think that there is, there are things you can do that are psychologically put you in a space where,
Yeah.
you can get the mindset towards success. It's a matter of just, it's balancing. It's anything in life is balance,
Mm.
right? I
Right.
mean, God, I remember there was a rumor years ago, to bring it back to Star Wars, that the Star Wars sequel, the first movie, was going to be called Balance of the Force. Like, that was like a balance of the Force was something that was like thrown around for a long time. And that term was never, I mean, it was used actually in The Last Jedi, the term balance, but
Yeah.
any life is balance, work life, home life, you know, love life, business, just everything. It's
Yeah.
balance. And that's a huge challenge. Artists struggle with that. That's why,
Mm.
some of the most successful artists are the ones who focused on the business side.
Yeah.
George Lucas was, I'm going to design a toy line that is going to
Yeah.
be, movies that I want to make. So there you are.
It's one of the things, like, I mean, for what we do with Plunge, we've got like a community-based convention. We've just had a successful, Kickstarter, as well as putting magazine out and stuff. And I said to my nephew, like, this is the same nephew, back, who I babysat, but he's now 6. He's now 13. And I said to him about a year or two ago, and I said, hey, listen, I don't have children, so this is going to be yours one day. And I said, what I need you to do to take over this is to learn business, learn digital and traditional art, and that way, because he's likes to draw and do right. I said, then you can have the business when in 10 years. He said, what if I have it in 5 years? I said, well, I said, you better get have more learn maths and business really fast then, as well as your talent. And I think a lot of times we don't tell that to kids. We don't tell them that they need to learn business with their talents. And so they focus on the talent more and the skills, the creativity more. And that's why we have a lot of, that's what I feel, because I remember going to art school and being around people who like, poor student, or, like a poor artist was the mentality. And I think it's, maybe we need to rethink how we tell people about their skills and how to look after their art, and watching the next generation come up. The best thing would be to just say, hey, look, learn business, learn business, learn business, as much as you put all your effort into that. What do you think about that? I mean, like, you've just mentioned that, but do you think we should teach
I
that
think
to
you're just
people?
repeating. I think you're just repeating what I just said. So yes,
Yeah,
you need to learn business. The problem
yeah,
is that public education does not focus on that kind of
right,
success. Public education focuses on training people for jobs that are needed in society,
right,
and they don't even do a good job at that.
yeah,
Particularly in America, I think our education system is horribly broken, horribly broken. And I remember vividly graduating from from high school. I
mm,
graduated from high school. I never graduated from college. I dropped out because I thought it was a
yeah,
waste of money
same,
because I was
yeah,
paying for it. So I remember graduating from high school and thinking to myself, I
yeah,
am filled with all sorts of facts and information, and I don't know what I'm supposed to do. I don't know how to do
mm,
my taxes. I don't know how to do some very basic things. I forced myself to learn those things. And even
mm,
when I was in high school, I took, you know, elective classes to better
mm,
myself. I took a typing class. I was not very good at typing.
mm,
At the time, I was not very good. And the metric that they used to get a good grade in that class was speed and accuracy. And I was very accurate, but I was not good at the speed. And it actually hurt my overall GPA, my grade point average. I also
mm,
took a home economics course. Why did I take a home economics course? Because I wanted to know how to sew on a button. So if a
yeah,
shirt that I had lost a button, I could sew on a button. Or I learned how to cook a Thanksgiving dinner. I know how to do that. Now,
yeah,
unfortunately, these are the types of skills that families should really be in
mm,
charge of passing on to their kids. I, on an elective basis, took a lot of courses I didn't have to take that I probably wasn't very good at, but
yeah,
it forced me to develop skills. That's
mm,
just that's a mantra for life. That is a
yeah,
mantra for life is develop the skills. I I read a lot of books. And by read, I mean I
mm,
listen to books. I'm very well listened. So I
yeah,
listen to a lot of audiobooks while I'm doing inconsequential BS. And
mm,
I usually I go back and forth. So I'll listen to a biography or an
mm,
autobiography of a comedian or an artist. So a book about art, right? Or a novel. Like I recently listened to Dune again. Okay.
mm,
Then I go from that and I listen to a business book. So there are several good business books. The
mm,
4 Hour Work Week is a good business book. The
yeah,
No Asshole Rule is a good business book. Uh,
right,
so again, it's the balance, right? So I'm listening to a book about an artist or something artful or a novel. It's a
mm,
type of it's a different type of entertainment or listening than it is when I listen to a book like The 4 Hour Work Week
yeah,
or 7 Habits of Highly Successful People.
mm,
So I balance it. It's like one is like I'm gaining sort of artful insights, and the other one it's like, well, the 4 Hour Work Week, I'm just developing, different work efficiency skills.
right,
So yeah, I mean, I'm self-taught.
mm,
I dropped out of college. I thought that college was, at least for what I wanted to pursue, I thought it was expensive and a kind of a waste of money in the sense that I was buying these prohibitively expensive books. I mean, hundreds of dollars for books at the time. That was prohibitive. Then I was made to read the book and regurgitate the contents to the professor as proof that I had read the book. When I just thought to myself, well, I can just read books. I don't need to prove to a teacher to get some grade. I don't need someone judging me. And I don't, I've worked in the corporate world. I've worked for companies like FX and Stars and G4 TV, and they decide how much money you're worth. And I don't do that. I'll decide how much money I'm worth. I could be more successful monetarily speaking. I could be much more successful monetarily speaking, but that's not what's important to me. Life balance, happiness, all those things those are more important to me than, I think in some ways I see my friends who have vast sums of money, it becomes burden. You reach a certain level of having a decent amount of money and there's happiness in that, so that works for me. I can't speak for everybody. I can only speak for myself and my own life experience. So I hope that offers some insights. I don't know if you have a final question. I know I've got to leave at the moment. So.
Yeah. I was going to talk about Blade Runner, but that is my number one movie. So I was quite surprised when I saw you talk about being number one movie as well, and it got me into film.
I wouldn't say number one. It's certainly in the top films. I mean, that movie was 1982. 1982 was this bizarre banner year for genre entertainment. Had finally come of age in 1982. It was crazy the number of movies that came out in 1982, Blade Runner being among them. And I remember Blade Runner failed. When that movie first came out, I was in a theater with probably 3 other people the opening weekend, first showing of this film, and empty theater. I was like, this is crazy. It's got Harrison Ford, freaking Han Solo. Nobody seemed to care. And I saw the film and I was fascinated by it. I saw it a second time in the theater, and just it had this cult following, And the fact that we're still talking about this movie to today is shows how powerful it is. I mean, many of the things, a lot of the things this movie predicted, with the exception of flying cars, Los Angeles has kind of turned into Blade Runner. Sex robots are real. They're not as functional as the ones in the replicants in Blade Runner, but that is a real thing. So, I love that movie, and it, I don't know, 2049 there's some good ideas in it, but it's ultimately, I don't really work for me. But, that movie just, it's interesting to see. I mean, we talk about films that come out now, it's like a certain film gets rave reviews, and I'm like, just wait. Because on a certain timeline, you see the kind of movies that survive, and it's not always the movies that were financially successful. David Lynch's Eraserhead. You look at movies that failed, quote, I put in quotes, failed when they came out, and it's
longevity, I guess. And cult followings of stuff like they said they wanted to cancel Star Trek, yet here we are now. Are we on to 60 years almost? And thank you so much,
we're
Chris,
coming
for
up on 60 years. We're coming up on 60 years. Thanks for having me on the show. I hope we offered some insights, and I'm just from watching me, I'm a very common sense, no BS guy. And I just sort of tell it like it is. And I also, on top of that, though, I respect other people's opinions. You can watch the Star Wars sequels, and if you enjoyed them, good on you. That's good. Enjoy it. I would say expand your horizons, watch some other things. I think it's important to have a diversified media diet. So I watch a lot of foreign films. I grew up watching a lot of Asian cinema when I was a kid. And I think when you have that kind of broad spectrum of movies and TV that you watch, it gives you a completely different view of the world. So thank you for having me on the show. Have a great
Appreciate it.
rest of
Thank
your
you.
day. All right.
Awesome.
Take care.
Thank you.
Take care,
All right.
everybody. Later. Bye-bye.